When Barack Obama spoke about immigration on live television, the moment felt strikingly different from the standard back and forth of political commentary. He wasn't rattling off statistics, nor was he diving into the complexities of legislation. Instead, he chose a human example, someone whose story was familiar to almost everyone watching. He brought up Melania Trump. The decision to mention her was deliberate, yet it was delivered with that calm conversational tone Obama often used when he wanted to drive home a point without sounding confrontational. He noted that Melania came to the United States as an immigrant, built a life here, pursued her career, and eventually became the first lady of the country. By saying this, he wasn't simply pointing out a biographical detail. He was weaving her experience into the broader narrative of America itself. Obama reminded viewers that the United States has always been defined by stories, like hers, people arriving from different corners of the world, often with nothing but ambition and a willingness to work hard, and then contributing in ways that reach far beyond their personal lives. In his framing, Melania wasn't just a former model who married into politics. She was also a representation of how America provides opportunities, and how those opportunities ripple outward. The fact that someone who once came to the country as an immigrant could eventually stand on the world stage as First Lady was, in his eyes, a reminder that America still has the ability to transform lives. The subtlety in his message was unmistakable. Without raising his voice or making an outright attack, Obama drew a quiet contrast. He pointed out the irony that Donald Trump had spent years advocating for policies that made immigration tougher, and yet his own household was touched by the immigrant story. Obama didn't need to spell it out word for word. The audience could connect the dots themselves. He simply placed Melania's journey in the larger conversation, and let the implications speak for themselves. There was also a touch of warmth in the way he described her background. It wasn't meant to humiliate or mock. Rather, it was said in the same way Obama often talked about the immigrant families he met on the campaign trail. The parents who worked 2 or 3 jobs so their kids could go to college, or the young students who carried heavy accents but were excelling in classrooms. Melania's name added weight to the example because it was recognizable. Her story was living proof of the larger theme. America's greatness lies not in shutting people out, but in what happens when it lets people in. What made this moment powerful was that it didn't rely on policy jargon or political sparring. Obama knew that sometimes the most effective way to highlight contradictions was through storytelling. By focusing on one person, especially someone connected so closely to the former president, he turned an abstract debate about immigration into something tangible. Everyone watching understood who Melania was. Everyone knew the basics of her journey. In a single mention, he managed to bring the issue out of the realm of politics and into the personal. It also carried a deeper implication, that immigration isn't just about strangers arriving at the border. It's about neighbors, friends, co-workers, and yes, even first ladies. By pointing to Melania's journey, Obama was effectively saying, this isn't an issue that exists far away from us. It's woven into the fabric of families at every level, even at the very top. He wanted people to see that the conversation about immigration wasn't some distant policy argument. It was directly connected to the lives of people they recognized, admired, or at the very least, knew by name. And perhaps most importantly, Obama's words served as a reminder of the contradiction between rhetoric and reality. Donald Trump often spoke about immigration in terms of threats, risks, and dangers. Yet here was his wife, who embodied the opposite, someone who had come to America and embraced it. Someone whose immigrant journey became tied to the nation's highest office. Obama's choice to highlight her wasn't meant as a personal insult, but as a way of underscoring a point he had made throughout his career. America is strongest when it remembers that its identity is built on stories of people who once arrived from somewhere else. When the clip of Barack Obama's comments about Melania aired, Donald Trump's reaction was immediate and intense. Those who know him well often say that few things can set him off faster than feeling that his family is being drawn into the political spotlight, especially in a way that could be seen as critical. He has always been fiercely protective of the people closest to him, and in this case, the mention of his wife on live television cut deep. According to people who were nearby, he was visibly agitated, pacing the room, raising his voice, and insisting that Obama had crossed a line. For Trump, politics was fair game, but his wife was not supposed to be part of the arena unless she chose to step into it on her own terms. Trump's frustration wasn't simply about the fact that Obama had named Melania, it was also about the subtext. He understood that Obama was making a broader point about immigration policy, and was using his wife as an example to highlight the contradictions between his political stance and his personal life. To Trump, this felt less like a compliment and more like a cleverly veiled jab. He was known to be highly sensitive to appearances, and he could instantly recognize when someone was framing him in a way that might resonate with the public but cast him in a negative light. Obama, with his polished delivery and knack for rhetorical precision, had managed to do just that. In private, Trump often expressed the view that the media and political opponents had treated Melania unfairly. He felt that people dismissed her accomplishments, overlooked her efforts as First Lady, and sometimes reduced her to little more than a headline. Hearing Obama talk about her on live television triggered that same sense of grievance. He reportedly muttered to those around him that the former president was using her to score political points. His anger was fueled not only by the content of the remark but also by the knowledge that millions of people had just watched it live. What stung even more was that Obama hadn't sounded angry or vindictive. He had said it with calmness, even with what sounded like admiration, that made it harder for Trump to dismiss the comment as a typical attack. Instead, it came across as measured, thoughtful, and difficult to rebut without sounding defensive. For Trump, who thrived in sharp and forceful ways, this kind of subtle critique was infuriating. He couldn't simply label it fake news or call it an outright lie, because the fact of Melania's immigrant story was true. His reaction then wasn't just about protecting his wife's name, it was also about the political implications. He worried about how the public would perceive the comment, whether voters might begin to see a gap between his tough talk on immigration and the personal reality of his family. For someone who placed so much emphasis on controlling the narrative and projecting strength, this was a vulnerability. Obama had, in just a few words, opened a crack in the image Trump worked so hard to maintain. Those who were in the room described the moment as one of simmering rage. Trump repeated that Obama should have left her out of it, and at one point, slammed his hand down on the desk in frustration. To him, this wasn't a clever rhetorical point, it was personal interference. The fact that it happened on live television only magnified his anger. He despised the idea that Obama had gained the upper hand in a way that would be replayed across news networks and dissected by commentators. It wasn't the first time Trump had clashed with Obama in the public eye, but this time felt different. In Trump's mind, it wasn't just about him being criticized, it was about his family being drawn into the conversation without their consent. And for someone who valued loyalty above almost everything else, he saw it as his responsibility to defend them, whether through his words, his actions, or by publicly pushing back in some form. His reaction underscored just how much weight he placed on appearances and respect, especially when it came to his wife. The anger, however, also revealed something deeper about Trump's political instincts. He knew that the line between personal and political was often blurred in the public sphere, but he still believed there should be boundaries. When Obama crossed into that territory, no matter how carefully or subtly, Trump couldn't see it as anything other than an attack. And in his world, attacks demanded a response. The public reaction to Barack Obama's remarks about Melania Trump revealed just how divided the country remains when it comes to issues of immigration, politics, and personal boundaries. For some viewers, Obama's words felt refreshing. They believed he had articulated something important, that even the most high-profile families are touched by the immigrant story, and that America is defined by those journeys. These individuals praised him for bringing the conversation back to a human level, one that was relatable and undeniable. To them, mentioning Melania was not an attack, but rather a reminder that immigrants are part of the fabric of every community, from ordinary neighborhoods to the White House itself. They applauded his calm tone and saw it as a way of cutting through the noise of political rhetoric. But others saw the moment very differently. For Trump supporters, the mention of Melania felt unnecessary and out of bounds. They argued that Obama could have made his point about immigration without invoking her name. To them, the decision to highlight her journey was a subtle attempt to embarrass Donald Trump, to point out a contradiction in his policies, and to do it in a way that millions would notice. On social media, many of Trump's allies voiced their frustration, calling it disrespectful and accusing Obama of dragging family into politics. Their reaction reflected a broader belief that the former president was exploiting a personal detail to score political points. Trump himself amplified that sentiment by reacting strongly behind the scenes and later making his displeasure known through comments to his circle. He fed into the perception that Obama's remark had been unfair. His anger gave his supporters a cue. If he was outraged, then they, too, should view the comment as a step too far. This dynamic deepened the divide in public opinion. For some, Obama was being truthful and principled. For others, he was being sly and provocative. The discussion spilled into television debates, newspaper columns, and online threads. Analysts dissected Obama's tone, wondering whether he had meant the comment as praise, critique, or some mixture of both. The ambiguity of his delivery left room for interpretation, which only heightened the divide. Those predisposed to admire him saw it as dignified and clever. Those predisposed to dislike him saw it as manipulative. It was a perfect example of how political moments in America are filtered through partisan lenses, with people seeing not only what was said but what they expected to hear. What made the divide sharper was the fact that immigration itself remains one of the most polarizing topics in the country. By tying Melania's story to the issue, Obama ensured that his remark would not be seen in isolation. For those sympathetic to immigrants, it was a poignant reminder that behind every debate are real human lives. For those who supported Trump's stricter stance, it was an unwelcome intrusion that seemed designed to expose hypocrisy. This tension played out publicly as commentators debated whether Obama had crossed a line or whether Trump was overreacting. Even outside of political circles, ordinary people weighed in. Some admired Obama's ability to connect a national issue to a personal story, even one involving a rival's family. They felt it made the debate more relatable. Others, however, expressed discomfort, saying that families should be off in political discourse, regardless of the circumstances. This everyday discussion mirrored the broader political polarization, showing how deeply personal people's feelings about immigration and leadership can be. Trump's presence in the story ensured that the divide only grew wider. His reputation for fiery responses meant that even a subtle comment could explode into a major talking point once he reacted to it. For supporters, his anger validated their sense that his family had been disrespected. For critics, his outrage looked disproportionate, as though he could not handle even the gentlest observation about his household. This contrast fed into the ongoing narrative of Trump as a figure who evokes strong emotions on both sides of the spectrum. The divide also highlighted the way political figures like Obama and Trump use narrative differently. Obama leaned on storytelling, often pointing to individual examples to illustrate larger themes. Trump, by contrast, thrived on blunt statements and direct challenges. When those two styles clashed in this instance, it created a moment that was both subtle and explosive at the same time. The former president's carefully worded observation met the latter president's instinctive defensiveness, and the public was left to take sides. In the end, the mixed reactions said as much about the state of American politics as they did about the comment itself. Obama's words were interpreted through the filter of identity, ideology, and loyalty. Trump's reaction became part of the story, magnifying the divide even further. The episode underscored how something as seemingly straightforward as referencing a well-known immigrant story could become a flashpoint, not because of the words alone, but because of who said them, who was mentioned, and how the country already felt about both men. The exchange between Barack Obama and Donald Trump over Melania's immigrant background carried weight far beyond a single television moment. At its core, it brought into sharp focus the tension between rhetoric and reality, between political messaging and personal lives. Obama, by highlighting Melania's journey, reminded people that immigration is not just an abstract policy. It is part of the lived experience of families at every level of society. The bigger picture was that Trump had built much of his political identity around tough talk on immigration, yet his own household reflected the very story he often described in critical terms. This contrast did not go unnoticed, and it raised difficult questions about consistency and authenticity. Obama's style was deliberate. He framed Melania's experience not as a critique of her, but as an example of how the American system can elevate people from around the world. His words hinted at a larger truth, that immigrants are not threats to the country, but contributors to its growth. He didn't directly accuse Trump of hypocrisy, but the suggestion was there, gently placed for the audience to consider. By doing so, he shifted the conversation away from border walls and enforcement, and toward the lived reality of immigration as part of the nation's identity. Trump's reaction revealed how vulnerable he felt to that kind of framing. His immigration policies were among his most defining positions, ones he used to rally his base and distinguish himself from his opponents. For Obama to point out that his wife embodied the immigrant experience cut into that narrative. It forced people to think about whether Trump's policies aligned with his personal life, and whether his arguments could withstand the scrutiny of real-world examples. Even if Obama didn't say it outright, the implication that Trump's household contradicted his political stance was a powerful one. The bigger picture also extended to the role of symbolism in politics. Melania's story became more than her on it, became a symbol of the broader immigrant story in America. Obama used her as a stand-in for countless families who had come to the country seeking opportunity. In contrast, Trump viewed her story as private, personal, and separate from politics. The clash between those perspectives exposed the difficulty of keeping personal lives apart from political debates, especially when the personal story is so relevant to the issue at hand. For the public, the moment was a chance to reflect on the deeper contradictions within political discourse. Supporters of Obama saw it as an important reminder that immigration is not a distant issue, but something that shapes even the most powerful households. Supporters of Trump, however, saw it as an unfair attempt to undermine him by blurring the lines between his family and his policies. In either case, the exchange revealed how much immigration remains a touchstone in American politics, capable of stirring emotions and sparking debate whenever it is raised. It also underscored the enduring rivalry between the two men. Obama had always framed immigration as a story of opportunity and renewal, while Trump portrayed it as a matter of control and security. By placing Melania at the center of that contrast, the live television moment became another chapter in their ongoing battle over what America represents. Obama leaned on the narrative of inclusion. Trump, in turn, reacted with outrage, reinforcing his narrative of defense and protection. The clash was not just about one remark, it was about two competing visions of the country. What made the moment particularly striking was that it showed how politics and personal lives are intertwined in ways that cannot easily be separated. Trump wanted to keep his wife out of political conversations, but Obama's point was that her story was inseparable from the national conversation about immigration. The bigger picture, then, was not about a single disagreement, but about the broader question of how personal stories shape public policy debates. Can a leader separate his personal life from his political stance, or do the two inevitably collide? In the end, the exchange illuminated a central tension of Trump's presidency. He positioned himself as the defender of strict immigration policies, yet the closest person in his life represented the very journey he often portrayed in critical terms. Obama's comment forced that contradiction into the spotlight, not through direct confrontation, but by gently pointing to a truth everyone already knew. The contrast between policy and reality, rhetoric and family, was the larger picture that the moment revealed. As the dust settled around Barack Obama's carefully chosen words and Donald Trump's fiery reaction, what remained was more than just a political skirmish. It was a reminder of how personal narratives can shape national debates, and how the intersection of politics and family is never as clean as leaders might wish. Obama's decision to highlight Melania and Trump's immigrant story was not delivered as an attack, nor did it carry the tone of mockery. Instead, it was framed as a reminder that America's strength has always come from the people who journey here with hope, ambition, and resilience. Yet in the world of politics, even the gentlest reminder can ignite outrage when it touches on a sensitive nerve. Trump's response made it clear just how protective he is of his family and how quickly he reacts when he feels their names are being used for political purposes. His anger underscored the tension between the public image he works to project and the vulnerabilities that exist behind the scenes. For him, Obama's comment wasn't just about immigration, it was about respect, boundaries, and control over how his wife's story is told. That personal reaction turned what might have been a brief moment on television into a major talking point, amplified by the media and debated by the public. The divided reactions from Americans showed how moments like this are rarely judged on neutral ground. Supporters of Obama saw his remarks as a thoughtful reminder of the immigrant contributions that define the nation. Supporters of Trump saw it as a low blow, an unnecessary reference to family that crossed into personal territory. The stark contrast in interpretations revealed more about the state of America than about the words themselves. In today's political climate, people don't just hear a statement, they filter it through their loyalty, their identity, and their beliefs about the figures involved. What makes this episode stand out is not just the clash between two former presidents, but what it represents about the larger debate. Immigration is not only about laws and policies, it is about people. By invoking Melania's story, Obama reminded the country that even the families in the highest offices are part of that reality. Trump, by bristling at the mention of his wife, revealed how personal and sensitive those stories can be when they collide with political agendas. Both perspectives carry truth. Immigration is deeply personal, and at the same time, it is inseparable from the national conversation. In the end, the bigger lesson may be about the power of storytelling. Facts and figures about immigration can fade from memory, but personal examples linger. Obama understood that. Trump understood the risks of it, and the public was left to wrestle with what it means when politics and personal lives meet on a stage that millions are watching. The moment reminded America that behind every debate are real people and real stories, and that sometimes the most profound truths emerge not from policy speeches, but from the human details we can all recognize.